at the top of the hour here. We'll go ahead and get started as a few people join us. But thanks everybody for attending. My name is Rachel. I lead the marketing team that's helping to support today's event. We appreciate you joining us today. Before we get started, just want to make you aware that the webinar is being recorded. We are discussing AI in the modern workplace today. This is the first of our 4-part webinar series. So if you haven't seen the full series, please feel free to join us for the next once a month. We will be having this and talking a little bit more and deeper about Copilot and all things Copilot. We have saved time at the end of today's presentation for Q&A, so please feel free to use the chat to submit any questions you have throughout the presentation. I'll just give you a little thumbs up to let you know that I saw it, and then we'll surface it at the end during that Q&A time. So we're excited to be with you today. We are very fortunate to have 2 of our Copilot experts to lead today's presentation. So we have both Caitlin and Timothy. Caitlin will be joining us in just a few minutes. I think she's running from call to call, but we got Timothy here to kick us off. So I'll hand it over to you, Timothy.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, thanks all for joining today's AI in the Modern Workplace webinar. We're really excited to talk about Copilot. Caitlin and I both have worked on, it feels like countless Copilot projects at this point, but we're really excited to kind of share with you some information about Copilot, a history of AI, take a look at how Copilot works, and kind of look at some demos and hopefully kind of get you all started on your generative AI journey. So hopefully this is either, maybe a reminder of how great AI can be in the workplace, or it's really kind of that jumping off point for your organization. Maybe your organization is a little new to generative AI, and hopefully this sparks some interest and kind of gets you all started with Copilot and Copilot for M365. So as Rachel mentioned, my name is Tim Evans. I am an adoption change management consultant at Valorum Reply. I am joined alongside Caitlin Kelly, also an adoption change management consultant at Valorum Reply. And what we're going to talk about today is something a little bit like this. So like I mentioned, we're going to kind of go through a brief history of AI. We're then going to talk about why it's so important to bring AI into the workplace and why really it's kind of the proper time to bring AI into the workplace. Caitlin then is going to go through Microsoft's AI lineup and Copilot specifically. I'll then kind of finish this off with some demonstrations. So talking about some day in the life, some scenarios that your departments might find themselves in, and then some recorded demos of how Copilot can aid and assist in those day in the life scenarios. And then like Rachel mentioned, if you do have questions as we go through our webinar, please do feel free to drop them into the chat. By default, your microphones and cameras are disabled, but if you do have a question and you don't want to forget it, pop it into the chat. Rachel will give it a thumbs up, and then we'll surface those at the end as kind of like an open Q&A session. Really quickly, before we kind of get started here, just a reminder that this is not the only webinar Reply has ever done, and not the only or the last webinar that we'll be doing. So we do have some awesome webinars coming up. We have information security and protection. We have enabling Microsoft 365 Copilot adoption. You might see some familiar faces leading that session. And then we have Copilot for Microsoft 365 extensibility. We've got a QR code here that'll take you directly to the registration page. But towards kind of the end of our session, we'll also resurface these 3 sessions so that you can register and kind of join. They're all great webinars. They are going to cover kind of, different instances and sections of Copilot. We're going to touch on kind of a few of these things throughout the session today. But as you are looking to dive deeper with generative AI and, you're starting your generative AI journey, feel free to kind of check back in and check into these Reply webinars, because they are awesome and provide great information. And again, hopefully get you all started on your organization's journey. So I talked a little bit about Reply. Before we officially get started, if you aren't familiar with who we are at Reply, Reply is a network of consultancies, and specifically at Valorem Reply, we are focused on the Microsoft tech stack. So we are a part of the larger Reply group. We are a Microsoft solutions partner. And Caitlin and myself are specifically a part of the modern work team. So we work quite a lot with Copilot, and we've actually been lucky enough to be part of the early access Copilot program and the Jumpstart program with Copilot. So not only are we qualified, Caitlin certainly qualified, I think, maybe a little more than me, just kidding. But we are absolutely thrilled to kind of talk about Copilot. We love Copilot. We work with it every single day, and we're here to share some great information. So with that, I'll hand it over to Caitlin to talk about a quick, brief history of AI.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tim. And yes, we've been working with Copilot so long now. I can't believe that I think I was first starting some of our initial explorations over a year ago now. So incredible the way that it has come along. But yes, before we dive in a little bit too deep into the functionality of Copilot, I do want to talk about the history of AI, because the term AI has obviously been a bit of a buzzword recently, but the reality is that AI has been around and, for much longer than people think, and people have been using it for much more than they realize. As we think about AI, it's actually become such a core piece of what we do every day that we kind of forget it exists, and it permeates every single industry. So AI tools like expert systems are used all over healthcare to diagnose illnesses or make predictions on future illnesses like tumor growth or finding bacterial infections. Speech recognition is something that we know and love every single day now, but the earliest form of it came commercially to us through Dragon Dictate, which I have visceral memories of because my attorney father was so thrilled with Dragon Dictate. It was all he talked about for years, but it did mean that I got to keep all of his tape recorders. And then in other industries, using AI is critical, like in video games. So all of those non-player characters or challenging opponents use multiple types of AI. I think everyone knows where they were when IBM's Deep Blue won that chess match as well. And then, of course, there's all the AI that exists in our homes, like Roombas, who use autonomous systems to complete tasks. So I do want to take a look then about how that relates to generative AI. Yep. Okay. There's also Clippy, who you might even remember as your former Microsoft assistant, who actually used AI as well. So that was natural language processing and a rule-based system to contribute its suggestions. So that's actually, quite a good segue. Thank you, Clippy, for helping me out after all of these years to segue into understanding how those forms of AI have created a baseline of what we use today. So there's components of generative AI, right? The first thing that we need to consider is that natural language processing that Clippy used, or NLP. That's focused on interactions between computers and human language. So Clippy was really early and basic, but NLP now can classify loads of text, analyze sentiment, and answer questions in really powerful ways. Think of all of the chatbots that you interact with today, whether it's in your own organization or you're getting support online somewhere. The goal for NLP is to enable computers to understand and generate language in a way that is both meaningful and useful. And so NLP is one field of AI. Another overarching sort of classification of AI systems is machine learning. And machine learning is all about training algorithms to make predictions or learn from data. So instead of being explicitly programmed to perform a task, ML models learn from patterns. So just like with the natural language processing, we interact with machine learning every day. So whether we're analyzing financial market data or simply scrolling through Netflix's recommended shows and movies based on what we've watched, those are all forms of common machine learning. So you have natural language processing, you have machine learning, and they come together beautifully with generative AI. So generative AI uses the machine learning to learn from a diverse range of text data, and then it uses the natural language processing to understand the context and generate responses that are contextually and grammatically correct. I'll say mostly grammatically correct. I've seen a couple of errant commas throughout, but I won't fault Copilot too much on that. What we're not necessarily seeing here is super explicit instruction, right? So when we use generative AI, what we're doing is we are making variable and creative and new responses. So whereas we think of like automation, right? Those are like rule-based AIs. They're really straightforward. They're repetitive tasks, but generative AI excels in those more complex, creative, and adaptive applications. So there's my brief history, but I'm going to pass it back now to Tim to talk about a little bit more of the context of using this in the workplace.
Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, so when we think about generative AI, I think the reason why most of us have joined here is kind of this core question: why bring generative AI into your workplace, and why now specifically? So we've got a few statistics to kind of highlight and outline why you should be thinking about bringing generative AI into your workplace. And then I have a few kind of anecdotal evidence of kind of backing up our statistics here. So looking at our kind of hardcore data, our nitty-gritty numbers, when we think about bringing generative AI into the modern workplace, and these are all kind of numbers here from Microsoft, from our work trend analysis report, 64% of folks say that they have struggled with finding time and the energy to get their work done. And then if we think back to fateful February 2020, since then, and that's 4 years ago now, which is surprising to think. Since then, folks are in 3 times the amount of meetings, Microsoft Teams meetings, and calls as well. So that's 3 times the work that folks were experiencing pre-2020. When we surveyed folks about their anticipation or desire for generative AI, folks said 70% or 70% of those folks said that they would want to delegate as much as possible to AI to lighten or lessen that workload. So that 3 times workload, that workload that is never ending. If you're like me or like Caitlin in meetings before this webinar, you're in back-to-back meetings all day, and 70% of folks want to use generative AI to delegate some of the work to become more efficient. And then we kind of think on the other side or the flip side of the coin, thinking about, these taglines or maybe myths that generative AI is only going to be cutting headcount. In reality, when Microsoft and this report here focused and surveyed leaders, we actually heard that folks and leaders specifically are 2 times more likely to say that generative AI is actually going to boost productivity rather than cutting headcount. So it's more about doing more, becoming more efficient, rather than reducing workforce. And when we look at kind of 3 main components of the challenges that employees are facing today, we've kind of segmented them off into 3 different sections or segments here. We've got the broken meeting, we've got the information labyrinth, and we have the blank page. And we'll talk a little bit later about how AI and specifically Copilot can help with each one of these kind of issues or obstacles that folks are facing. But when we think about the broken meeting, this is that idea that folks don't know how to join those calls when there's 3 times the amount of calls that they had in maybe 2019. They can't be everywhere at once. My favorite analogy is the time turner from Harry Potter, that if we all had a time turner, maybe we could be everywhere at once. But in this case, in our world, this is just not a reality, right? So receiving the information that employees need is becoming a real challenge. Joining those meetings and being that person that says, "What have we covered? Sorry, I was in a different meeting," is not only a little embarrassing, but it's a real hamper to productivity, and it's a real obstacle for organizations today. So then on top of that, we think about this information labyrinth, right? each organization has a different tech stack. Each organization has locations that are specific. Oh, jumped just ahead quickly. Let's go back to our information labyrinth. But as we think about where information is stored, it can oftentimes be a challenge for employees to find exactly what they're looking for. So 62% of employees say they struggle spending too much time searching or locating information that they need. And folks that are heavy email users are actually going to spend the equivalent of an entire workday just in email. And that might be emailing back and forth, correspondence, but it also might be looking for previous emails that are key or critical to get their day-to-day done. So this information labyrinth, and this is something that I see quite frequently, is a real challenge for organizations as folks are trying to complete, again, focusing on that 3 times the workload. Folks are really struggling to complete or find the information they need. And then finally, the blank page. This was once known as writer's block. The blank page is a challenge that I'm sure you all have faced with so much to do, with so many calls, with so many meetings. People don't have that heads down focus time. People can't get started. And a lot of people say that it's really a challenge to find that inspiration. And that's really where Copilot comes in. We're going to talk a little bit later about this, but having Copilot there to help you just get started allows employees to focus on the work that really matters. So then finally, we look at a few more numbers before we dive deeper into Microsoft's AI lineup. We'll look at these numbers here that 78% of AI users are actually bringing their own AI tools to work. I love that when we created this deck, we used a wonderful acronym, BYOAI. Maybe that'll be catching on soon. Maybe something like fetch. But really, this is another thing that we've seen working alongside organizations. And if you join our later security webinar, this is something that can really cause data issues, security issues. It can really provide a major threat to your organization if your employees are BYOAI, bringing their own AI into the fold to assist their work. And again, 78% is a very large number, and I think that 78% is very real because, again, working with many organizations, I've heard, yes, I'd like to use Copilot, but I'm also bringing another AI tool into the fold, and that really provides a major security threat for the organization. We also have numbers here that 52% of employees are reluctant to admit how important that AI tool is to their work. And then 53% of those folks using AI at work worry that using it on important tasks makes them look replaceable. So this is, I think, more about messaging. This is about why we want to bring generative AI to your organization and really taking control of the message that, as we saw with the previous stat, it's not about reducing headcount or making employees look replaceable, but it's about owning these great tools that are available to us, becoming more productive, more efficient, and again, kind of coming down to that core message that we want you all to focus on the work that really matters, not the summarization of emails that you might have missed, not searching for a file that you may have lost, but really, again, being inspired to create and do the work that your organization does. So with that, Caitlin's going to talk a little bit more about Copilot and specifically Microsoft's AI lineup.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. And yeah, what I think is so interesting too about some of those numbers, right? So the earlier numbers about where employees were struggling were coming in sort of late 2023. Now the numbers about folks coming in and bringing in their own AI tools because they see how impactful it is. It's just coming out the corner from earlier, this year in 2024. So it's all happening so fast. So really important to understand the tools that are available to you, especially if you're already invested in the Microsoft stack and what is available through Copilot. So the Microsoft AI lineup, right? Copilot, the name on its own, is Microsoft's generative AI tool. So, you can access it on a personal level through what used to be called Bing Chat. Now it's just Copilot. And so those are the AI-powered search, and answers and content generation, a lot more impactful than just a classic sort of Google keyword search and trying to sift through a bunch of links. But then when you add in your organization's E3 or E5 license, you do add in commercial data protection to the fold. So a little bit to what Tim was speaking about, you're adding in that layer of security so that your interactions, your organizational data stays safe. So folks, aren't necessarily bringing in third-party tools and sending out organizational information. Everything is protected by a service boundary. And so then on top of this sort of Copilot foundation come the other Copilots, including we've got Copilot for Microsoft 365, really the focus of this session, which is bringing in additional security, compliance, permissions, but then also the data, context, and applications we use. So all of the security settings that you have on your files, Copilot respects all of them because Copilot's associated with your user identity, so people can't go crawling for information that they shouldn't be able to see. And it's integrated in the applications, which is the huge bonus here, right? So instead of using a third-party tool and then having to copy and paste that content back and forth, trying to find ways to use it, you've already got your AI assistant just right where you're already working. Further sort of building on that Copilot for Microsoft 365 are what we call the Copilot for business functions. Among others, we have things like Copilot for sales, service, and finance. These really take Copilot from 365 and then integrates additional information. So whether you're thinking about data integration from Dynamics 365, Salesforce, ServiceNow, or SAP, all of those are then brought into specific applications in which they sort of are most relevant. Thinking of, Copilot for sales, bringing into Teams and to Outlook, where those sales teams are often working, bringing in critical data. So again, kind of taking everything, throwing your AI across the Microsoft 365 stack so that it is the most impactful. But of course, we are talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365 here. This is really what we call the tool for everyone. It's powered by OpenAI's GPT-4 large language model, in addition to the data, content, people, and files, and other information available in the Microsoft Graph. It's that information that you already have access to, right? So the security permissions we already talked about before. Copilot, of course, embedded it into your applications. It also makes it so that Copilot within your apps are fit for purpose. So Copilot in Excel is going to inherently be a little bit different than Copilot in Word because the ways in which you interact with those applications is inherently different. And then, of course, we have the ability to bring the internet into the fold. So you can have conversations using information available on the web when you're working in Word, asking for some of that research, grounding it in both your organization and the internet to help you complete the task that you've been assigned within Word. So really, really powerful, all in one easy location. So to look at it from a bird's eye view, this illustration really sort of depicts how it's all working behind the scenes. So we start sort of in this upper, left-hand corner with that Copilot icon. You can ask, in Word to create an FAQ document based on a series of files within Project X in your organization. So first thing it does is shoot that prompt into the graph in the semantic index for what we call pre-processing or grounding. So it's doing a lot of research to answer the questions. What is this project? What is this organization? What's the context for these reference files? Who's requesting it? What do you even mean by FAQ, right? So it's gathering all of that context there. I also want to call out that on the left-hand side, we have things like additional plugins, Bing, where we can pull in that information from the web, still protected by that outer sort of service boundary. So even as you're gathering extra data, it is still completely protected. We'll talk about extensibility in one of our upcoming webinars where we'll dive in a little bit further in there. But once everything is grounded, it is then shot over to the right-hand side into that large language model, which is going to sort of parse through everything and create a natural language response, like we saw going through that natural language model earlier in the presentation. So turning data and tokens into human-like speech, making sure then it's sent back to the graph for post-processing, so ensuring alignment of the response, and then it's giving it back to you within the application in which you asked. So it's pretty amazing stuff that happens in like 30 seconds, right? So really fast turnaround. Even as we're sitting there, watch it sort of dial up. It's important to remember all of the steps that it's going through. And of course, that's just one example of what Copilot might be able to do, creating a document based on a reference file and the context, something that I often do. And one of the most frequent questions we get when we talk about Copilot to organizations is, this is all great, right? Love this diagram. This is really cool. But who should be using this? Who realistically should be interacting with Copilot, and what should they be generating? And the short answer really is that everyone can use Copilot for Microsoft 365. Some of the other Copilots out there, right, for sales, for service, for finance, those are a little bit more specific to those roles. But Copilot for M365 is there to meet people no matter where they're working. What's critical to understanding the impact is understanding the business units. So regardless of whether a person is in HR, sales, finance, IT, there are use cases for everyone. And even within your own departments, there are prompts that might be really role specific. So there's often that sort of layer of personal use cases, and then department-wide use cases, and then even a few organization-wide ones. And the truth is that the use cases might surprise you. So some seem obvious. An executive assistant might find tremendous value using Copilot during Teams meetings or summarizing long email threads. A content creator can use Copilot to help liven up LinkedIn posts or rework a presentation. Others are sometimes less obvious. So someone who might need to extract data from Excel, but they don't spend a lot of time in Excel, they can have a natural language conversation in a few short words to get the answer or the formula or even something like a macro script really very quickly without needing a lot of context to understand how Excel works. So they're easy to identify processes that can use Copilot all the time. And then there are some of the one-offs where Copilot tasks, where Copilot, can help complete a complex task and then break it down to become more accessible. So I do want to take some time now to go through what those use cases look like. Many of these are informed by some of the work that we do with global organizations. So I'll go ahead and pass it back over to Tim to help walk us through some of these sort of day in the life use cases.
Absolutely. Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, so when we kind of look at Copilot in action, I think that's a great handoff of thinking about all folks in the organization can use Copilot. And it's really, just as Caitlin said, it's really about discovering the use cases. And like Caitlin was saying, our work with global organizations is just that, finding out use cases and matching Copilot to those use cases. So what we have here on a few slides is something that we use frequently, and it's a little bit of a day in the life storyboard. And what it's going to do is kind of take you through, let's call employee Jane Doe day at organization. And we're going to talk about all the different touch points Jane Doe could have with Copilot based on Jane Doe's department. So without further ado, let's actually jump into it. Our first case for Jane Doe is an HR use case and the idea of hiring a new employee. So when we think about HR, the overarching kind of work stream here is that idea of hiring a new employee and finding exactly where Copilot can help across this day in the life of hiring that new employee. So we might start in Copilot in Word, brainstorming the idea for the job description. We then might use Copilot, whether it's researching Copilot on the web, to reduce time to screen those candidates that have applied for the job. Then Jane Doe working with their team to kind of create interview questions might go into loop. Jane might click on Copilot, prompt Copilot to generate some ideas for how they might have to interview a specific candidate, and then build upon that blank page that Copilot has filled in. From there, those interviews are going to be conducted within Microsoft Teams, and we can use Copilot to summarize how those interviews went to really take and assist with detailed notes for each one of these interviews with each candidate. From there, maybe Jane has found that applicant that she wants to hire, and she's going to go ahead and draft an offer letter in Word using Copilot as, again, a starter to kind of create that email. Inside of that offer letter, you might attach it to an Outlook mail message. And then finally, once that applicant has accepted the offer letter, we might start working on onboarding materials inside of a PowerPoint, kind of handing over a PowerPoint for our new starters to kind of take them through their first few weeks, and using Copilot to kind of assist that creation process. So let's take a look here in a kind of short recorded demo of how we might use Copilot to generate a job description. So we've opened up Microsoft Word. We're typing here in the prompt pane, asking for a job description about a senior front-end engineer with specific criteria and credentials in mind. We might go ahead and prompt Copilot, receive the feedback again, overcoming or leaping over the obstacle of the blank page. And then from there, we might either use Copilot to help refine this content, which we're doing now, or we might even, like this first draft and begin to refine the content ourselves. So the idea here is that Copilot has taken information and put it into a usable first draft to begin our job description process for Jane Doe to hopefully find the perfect applicant for our job or our front-end engineer position. So our next use case is going to focus on Word as well, but we are going to touch a few different M365 applications as well, and it is more of a marketing use case. So this here is kind of the idea of creating an FAQ document. To fit into kind of our marketing department, we have created a branding FAQ, but this is something that I see with organizations across industries and really across departments, because FAQs are so crucial to provide accessibility for everyone in the team, and also to get everybody up to speed, whether they're a new starter, they're jumping into a new project, or just providing general information that's industry or technically specific to the work that you all do. So in this FAQ scenario, maybe we're working with John Doe instead of Jane Doe, and John Doe is gathering information with Copilot on the web or Copilot in Teams to find relevant documents that might provide helpful information for this FAQ document. John's also going to go directly to the web to use Copilot to kind of research what other questions John might need to use for his FAQ document. Again, we're going to go to Copilot in Word, and we'll have a recorded demo here in just a moment, but we're going to draft that initial FAQ document to really, again, overcome that blank page and to give us a first draft. We then might go into Whiteboard. We'll see Whiteboard a little bit later in a different use case, but Whiteboard is excellent for brainstorming, collaborating with team members, and when creating a branding FAQ, you might want to make sure you have it organized before you actually finalize that document, so that there's not, sections that don't necessarily make sense, or that there is information all over the FAQ. So finally, we're going to go back to Word. We're going to take that brainstorming session from whiteboard. We're going to refine our content, and then we are going to finalize and publish on a SharePoint site. And using Copilot in each one of these applications to provide an assist to either generate content or to summarize information, locate information, and to help us research what might make our FAQ document the most successful. So let's go ahead and take a look at a recording here. Rather than watching me type it into the prompt pane, I've started us a little early here. And what we're actually doing is referencing a file that I have that outlines the brand guidelines. So maybe I have a document in my M365 graph, maybe in OneDrive, that kind of illustrates or highlights what our company uses in terms of brand guidelines. And from there, I might be referencing that document to create an FAQ. Awesome. So we've got another use case here. I'm out of fake names, so we're going back to Jane Doe, and Jane Doe is working in finance this time. And in this time, we're looking at the idea of reviewing contracts. Again, this is a instance that we're going to look at Copilot inside of Word a little bit kind of more in depth, but this is more of that summary use case. Our first two use cases were overcoming that blank page, but in this scenario, we're going to use a document that's maybe already created, in this case, a contract, and we're going to want to extrapolate the key information of that document so that, maybe with this long or lengthy contract, we can quickly kind of get up to speed. So first, we're taking you through the day in the life with Jane. We're going to find the ask an email. We're going to use Copilot to do this, maybe Copilot chat, or maybe Copilot within Outlook. We're then going to recap a meeting. Maybe we had a meeting discussing this contract with internal stakeholders. We're going to jump into Copilot in Teams and jog our memory by using summarization after that meeting has been concluded. We're then going to take the contract that's been handed over to us, open it in Word, and use Copilot to provide a summary and to kind of analyze that contract to give us a little bit of an assist when trying to find the key or important details. We might be collaborating in Teams or in Loop. We then are going to prep for a meeting when we are finalizing this contract, and then we're going to go ahead and create an email response to our important stakeholders, drafting it using Copilot in Outlook. So again, we've jump started to already having our prompt right inside of that prompt pane. Maybe this contract has been handed over to us and it's regarding a software licensing agreement. We've referenced that document using the / or the plus button to attach that document right into the prompt pane. And now we have a new document that's summarizing maybe that lengthy contract. We've asked for an analysis of the clarity of the document. And we might be asking for a little bit more information in the follow-up prompt pane here. So again, giving us this ability to not only, like we saw in the first two use cases, to overcome that blank page, but in this case, summarizing a document that might be too long for us to really dive in manually, and pulling key or important details out of that document. All right, let's jump to our next use case. And just as we dive into kind of our last three use cases here, again, I want to really emphasize that the work that Caitlin and I do is very similar to this in nature, and it's understanding employees within your organization's use cases and kind of marrying or combining Copilot with those use cases. So in this case here, we are evaluating a new technology solution. We're going to focus here on Copilot in Excel, and we're going back to John Doe to take a look at maybe a new technology that his IT team is going to be evaluating. First, he's going to go ahead and gather the requirements that he might need. He then is going to research solutions, maybe using Copilot in Edge to find all of the different solutions that might be out there. He's going to use Copilot in Excel to help him build a build versus buy analysis. Maybe his in-house IT team could think about building this technology solution, but he really wants to know whether it's worth it to outsource this technology to a different vendor or to go ahead and build that himself. Whichever decision he makes, he's going to create a solution RFP. Again, overcoming that blank page using Copilot in Word. Maybe we're going back to comparing these different technologies. We're creating a comparison chart. And then finally, when we've selected the use case that we'd like to use here, we're going to go ahead and create a launch communication. And hopefully it'll be a little bit more change management focused, as Caitlin and I like to see. We'll be sending out reminders and providing training on these technology solutions that John is launching. So let's go ahead and take a look at that inside of Excel. We'll go ahead and play our recording here. Our prompt pane is over on that right side inside of Excel. And you can see here what John, or what I am doing, is going to be taking a look at the deviation from the lowest denominator inside of our estimated total. We want to find what is the most cost efficient for our organization. And then the final row is actually a row detailing how much it would cost for an in-house build. So we're asking for two things here. We're asking for Copilot to help us out, give us that assist on maybe a formula that we don't know how to do. And we are asking Copilot to actually insert that into columns G and column H. So the great thing here about Copilot within Excel is it's going to check for understanding. It's going to make sure the prompt that you typed out is exactly what you want. It's going to kind of give you feedback inside of the prompt pane, and then you can actually confirm or refine that prompt before making any changes to your Excel spreadsheet. So you see here we have columns G and column H as deviations from our lowest cost or deviation from the in-house build. And that gives John a great idea of which solution he should go with. All right, just finally here, we are going to jump to a project management use case. The last use case here, thinking about Jane working inside of project management and this idea of creating a project plan. So thinking about a project manager, there's so many different scenarios that a project manager can use or can leverage Copilot. In this task here, we're thinking about creating a project plan, breaking it into different subtasks and understanding and summarizing all the different information to build the framework for this specific project, whether that's holding meetings with different team members, identifying action items and stakeholders, needing to brainstorm, or coordinating across multiple different work streams and multiple different departments. So we've got three kind of different tools that we're using here, but as we go into our recorded demo, we're really going to focus on a tool that is one of my favorite inside of M365, and that's Whiteboard. So that idea of collecting all information that maybe you've used in a brainstorming session and summarizing that quickly into a loop component. So let's go ahead and jump right into our recorded demo and take a look at Jane reviewing the notes from a project plan and summarizing that project plan or those notes for a project plan into a loop component. Now, if you're not familiar with these two applications, Whiteboard or Loop, I highly recommend checking them out. Not only are they great M365 applications for collaboration and brainstorm, but like the other M365 tools, and as we can see here, they do have Copilot directly within them. So this idea of being able to use Copilot as an assistant or giving an assist throughout your different applications is really that through line of how efficient Copilot can be. So we've got a loop component here with a summary of our scatterbrained notes, making it really easy to kind of get back up to speed on what our meeting was about or what took place within our meeting. All right, so just before we pass it off to Caitlin to kind of close us up here, thinking about value categories and metrics, there are three kind of different segments here that we have broken this down into, and that's the idea of collaboration, comprehending, and creation. We've seen in action how Copilot can really be transformative as an everyday part of someone's work. We've gone from department to department, from use case to use case, and from tool to tool. But when it comes really to making the most out of Copilot and generative AI in the workplace, it's really not just about offering the tool, and it's really about thinking about metrics and continuing to identify those success metrics over time. So once you've enabled Copilot, we want to ask folks, are they in less meetings? Are those meetings shorter? Are more meeting recaps being generated? And are people spending less time in email? This is something that Caitlin and I kind of think about with every engagement throughout our customers and our clients, creating metrics that are most important to them, making sure we understand those metrics, making sure they're SMART goals, and making sure that we are kind of sizing up to those metrics as we deploy Copilot. So each one of these kind of segments here is where we like to create or kind of think about metrics. And at the end of the day, each one of these can really indicate the success of Copilot within your organization. So now that we've seen Copilot in action, I'll hand it over to Caitlin to kind of close us off here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Really great segue to talk about really the value that we see in Copilot for Microsoft 365. And a lot of those demonstrations are really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to its functionality. As we saw, we had specific recordings of, real life situations throughout a process where people can use Copilot. So, we can expand further and further beyond that. But now that we understand how it works, why employees are wanting Copilot, what we really need to do is assess its value really properly. And it can be hard to understand the value of Copilot when we speak in general terms like time saved. When we think of the business impact of Copilot, it's a bit different to other tools. When you're running a business analysis of other, tools and technologies, it's usually related to things like, what revenue is being generated, what costs have been cut. And it's not necessarily the same or as explicit with Copilot. So we need to look at ways in which we can improve efficiencies across the board. So looking at some of the non-value add activities that are necessary but eat away at the day, right? So as Tim was saying, like 10, 15 minutes checking emails, getting some of our basic research started, getting some of that, text started on the page. What can we chip away at? And we think about, some of those department processes that can be simplified and streamlined through Copilot on a daily or a weekly or a monthly basis. What are some one-off processes or tasks that can also receive Copilot's benefits? It's really only once we fully embed the tool that we start to really realize these benefits. And then when you use the tool to improve these efficiencies, we can then start to look at cost reduction. So thinking about what operational costs are out there, what additional tools can maybe be replaced or cut because now we have Copilot to help us. And then finally, we can understand how it relates to revenue growth or how that time is reinvested. Are we able to jumpstart work in such a way that we achieve organizational goals faster? What KPIs can be linked directly to the use of Copilot? When we start having those conversations, we can start to really thoroughly understand the value of Copilot a lot more in depth. And, some of the early numbers are out there. So in an April 2024 study conducted by Forrester on the total economic impact of Copilot for Microsoft 365, they found that organizations that leverage Copilot can increase their top line revenues up to 4%. They can then decrease operational expenditures by 0.7%, and they can reduce onboarding time for new employees by up to 30%. And then there are what we call kind of unquantifiable benefits, things like a better work-life balance, improvements to diversity, equity, and inclusion. How are we recruiting top talent and diversifying the thought in the room? And then how are we enabling others to speak up more effectively with their ideas? And at the end of the day, Copilot won't eliminate 50% of your tasks or automate 90% of your job. It's not built for that, like we saw in the beginning, right? It's built to be that extra factor that jumpstarts your tasks, that gets you going, that really enables you to work better. So just before we take some questions, I do want to cover a couple more things here. A quick review on what we've discussed, right? So we looked at how AI is everywhere, from Roombas to Clippy, and now how we understand how generative AI really works. We saw how employees are overworked, they're overwhelmed, and then we saw how Copilot can transform everyday jobs and work by really embedding into the flow of the work. And then, of course, we just heard how we need to monitor success, understanding the sort of value categories, the trends that we can look through to understand the value really. And of course, we understand that every organization is a different place in their AI journey. As Tim said, we've worked on a lot of Copilot deployments now. So that's really why we've developed this sort of compass framework to meet you where you are. From readiness and like basic enablement, technical government strategies, to all the way to extensibility. So bringing in plugins and other data into Copilot for Microsoft 365, we are here to help. And we've helped businesses of all kinds take their next steps into generative AI. If you are interested, but you're really not even sure where you're supposed to start on that framework, we do offer a free quick consultation to get to know you, your organization, your needs a little bit more. So you can request a link through that screen there and we can get started. I'm going to leave this up for a second so that folks, you can click on the link through the magic of PowerPoint Live. So thinking about sort of opening up to questions, I do want to take the time there. And oh, go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to go ahead and say, yeah, we've got a couple questions from Randall in the chat there. I can surface for you if you guys are ready.
Yeah, I saw Randall's first question there. Really great question, Randall, about a different sort of, you have a mailbox, you're getting actions or tasks to be completed. Can Copilot help you sort those emails by task and create an Excel or SharePoint list of those requests? That's a really great question, and I think gets into some of the core functionality of Copilot. So Copilot by itself is not necessarily going to take you from step A, all the way to Z through that action. What Copilot is best at is helping you take those steps really quickly. So as I think about kind of what you might need to do, right, Copilot can help you create some rules, sort through those emails. It can also help you develop the VBA script that you would need to launch those emails and link them into something like an Excel spreadsheet. And then from there, we can talk about the next steps, and Copilot can take you step by step to get that into something like a SharePoint list. And then you might want to actually start thinking about Power Automate, which will then bring that through holistically. You kind of get that process set up through the VBA script, but then Power Automate will be able to then from there take those rules and throw them over. So Copilot necessarily isn't taking that direct action for you, but it would help you with the step-by-step, which I really love because it enables every employee to help create those for themselves instead of saying, I'd love it if this happened, and then kind of becoming a large project. I can do that on my own with the help of Copilot.
Awesome. I think Rachel also asked about Excel or Word specifically, if Copilot could summarize what had changed since they last opened the document.
Yeah, so you definitely can ask about some of the recent changes that have been made. I really like to do that within the Copilot sort of chat experience, whether I'm accessing that through Teams, Outlook, or the web. I can reference the file as we saw Tim doing in those demos. He was doing a / and bringing those files in, and I can ask him what the latest changes have been on those documents themselves.
Awesome.
Caitlin, I was also going to say, oh, sorry, Rachel. I just
Yeah.
wanted to jump into
Yeah.
Randall, if you are using track changes, this was something that I was just working on with an organization, getting a summary of those track changes that have, or those red lines within a Microsoft Word document. So definitely there, not only just the changes as an editor, but if there are kind of suggestions or red lines that are put into a Microsoft Word document, you can prompt Copilot to give you a summary of what has been suggested within a document.
That's sensational. I didn't even know that, Tim. We learn something new from sharing our knowledge every single day.
And I see Timothy put into the chat the link for the consult there for anyone who's struggling to get it on screen for any reason, as well as a link to a good Microsoft resource for prompt tutorials that someone had posed a question about. We also have a new series, a Copilot newsroom series that we're doing once a month, the last Wednesday of each month, where we'll share the latest in Copilot updates. As Caitlin hinted at, there's always something new and always something changing. So we got our team together to do just a really informal join as you can Q&A style updates. So in 30 minutes, you can get caught up on everything that's new within Copilot. So I'll post the link here in the chat for that if you'd like to join. And then, of course, we have our next webinar for information security as it relates to Copilot that is on screen there. You can use the QR code that's coming up in October, and then the subsequent ones there following through the end of the year. So anybody else have any questions? We still have a few minutes. Feel free to pop those in the chat. We also have the marketing email address down there. If you'd like to get in touch with us or talk with Timothy or Caitlin or take advantage of that consult, please feel free to reach out there and we can get you in touch with the right person. Looks like a quiet chat. So if no one has any other questions, thank you so much for joining us today and your participation. And we hope to see you at the October event. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Timothy.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.